All right. Father Job Considine, thank you for agreeing to do this interview. It will be our interview number 3 on the Phroneo Substack project. And we're trying to explore topics in Christian asceticism, and more specifically, fasting is what I'm really interested in right now. And so thank you for agreeing to talk to me about fasting, and we will hopefully discuss some things that come up, if they come up, that are maybe a little bit outside of fasting. But the first question I have for you is, I know that you came to Orthodoxy as an adult. What was your previous experience with Christian asceticism, and specifically with fasting?
So first of all, I'd say, Father Sergey, thanks for inviting me. I still have no idea why you did, but here we are. But anyway, as a Protestant, I had really no Protestants do not fast in general, and any fasting that we did as a family was just because we ran out of food, which did happen, but not very frequently. I would say that in regard to that, the upbringing that I did have prepared me very well for Christian asceticism as I was able to enter Orthodoxy. So in terms of a work ethic, managing sleep, working hard, and really enjoying nature, all sorts of different things. I would say that, as an example, my family were teetotalers. So there was no alcohol in the house, and there was no coffee in the house. And so this is, it's unusual now, I would say, in this day and age, but that was a pretty common thing. The other thing I would say is that my father was a man of prayer, and that before every meal we prayed. We didn't pray outside that, but I know that he prayed a lot. And then at every meal, we also read scripture, usually a passage from the gospel and a psalm for every single evening meal. So there was very good preparation in that way. And the other thing I would say is that because we were, I would say, sort of on the lower half of being a poor farm family, we did not eat a lot of meat in general. So there you go.
That's very interesting. Actually, before I go to question number 2, I'd like to explore this because this is fascinating. We've known each other for a few years, and some of these things I had no idea.
Yeah.
So coffee, was there a religious reason, or you just your family just didn't drink coffee?
Two things on that. Both my maternal grandparents and my fraternal grandparents, so my mom's parents and my dad's parents, loved coffee, absolutely loved it. And even when they were desperately poor, the last thing to go in the house was coffee. So they always had coffee. And that produced a prejudice in both my mom and my dad that they weren't going to have coffee because they weren't going to spend any money on it. But besides that, they did not like the feeling that caffeine did to them. And so we were not allowed to have any caffeinated soft drinks. We didn't have soft drinks hardly anyway. But for instance, any cola products, nothing like that. That was not allowed just because Dad did not think that caffeine was in general good for you. He was very surprised to learn that Mountain Dew had a lot of caffeine in it. And so eventually that was taken away from us. But anyway, yeah, so he just didn't like putting drugs. My dad was an organic farmer for all of his life, and we raised most of our own food. And he just didn't really he thought it was unhealthy to consume.
But it wasn't a religious conviction that
not a religious conviction.
Okay.
No.
And then you mentioned sleep as a preparation for asceticism. Could you talk a little more about that? I mean, you didn't get enough sleep, or that was on purpose, or how did that work?
Maybe a couple things about that. So we had a large we were a dairy goat farm. We milked a lot of goats, somewhere in between 300 and 600 goats every morning and evening, twice a day. And so that would involve getting up at 4:30 in the morning so that we could get the milking done and then get to school, take a shower and get to school. And in the evening, my father gave us no curfews at all. Even when we were teenagers, there was no curfews, but I'm telling you, you better be ready to do chores at 4:30 in the morning. So as we became, as we became teenagers, I think every single one of us tried to stay out all night and then do chores the next morning. And I think everybody only did that once.
Mm-hmm.
So even as I got married, 4:30 in the morning became sort of a standard waking time. I would say that stayed with me until basically COVID hit. And then I started sleeping in a little bit later. But then now that we're back in the office and everything like that, I'm pretty much waking up about 5 o'clock in the morning again. So
right. So it's not a matter of not getting enough sleep per se, but having a very rigid schedule of when you have to wake up and get going.
So I think it's more that the farm tuned me to get by on about 7 hours of sleep a night.
Mm-hmm. So
That's really, I feel pretty good with 7 hours
form
of
of
sleep.
discipline. Yeah, form of
Yes.
discipline for sure.
Yeah.
And then about meat. So you say your family didn't eat a lot of meat. How would you describe that? Is it maybe once a week, once a month, or what was the pattern?
Maybe a story would help, and that is I think many people listening will probably be familiar with a dish called scalloped potatoes and ham. And so it's a dish with sliced potatoes, and it's got cream sauce and different things in it, and then they put ham in it. And I would say that basically one ham could last us an entire year in terms of scalloped potatoes and ham. Like there's like one slice of ham in that whole dish that would last. And so there was not a lot of meat in our dishes. It was the only time that we really, we ate a lot of casseroles. I would say we had a lot of food extenders, noodles, ate a lot of soups. There was always some meat in it, but not always, but usually there was some meat in it, but never a lot.
But mostly for flavor.
Yeah. And the only time we really had meat in general was like when we butchered chickens, and that way we would get like a whole piece of a chicken or something like that when we were growing up. But otherwise, it wasn't that we intentionally, it's just that it wasn't available. We didn't buy meat at the store.
Thank you. So when you first were discovering Orthodoxy, I'm sure you came upon the topic of fasting at the very least, and maybe other forms of asceticism. What was your first impression of these disciplines, and specifically fasting as it was presented to you at the time?
So I will back up maybe just a little bit. Maybe 10 years before I entered Orthodoxy, I was really on a religious exploration. And so during Lent, I tried different kinds of fasting, even as a Protestant myself. And one of the first things I gave up was coffee. I had learned to love coffee when I was in college, but I gave it up. And that was helpful in the sense that I learned that I needed to even moderate my coffee amount, because the 3 days of headaches I got in that first week of Lent by giving up coffee, I said I'd never want to go through that again. So even to this day, I love coffee, but I just drink a moderate amount. So on Sunday mornings when I'm serving liturgy, I don't have a headache.
That's
and
right.
so just be really careful about that. Did different things in Lent, really didn't understand, as a Protestant, didn't understand the purpose. But when I entered into Orthodoxy, I would say I still didn't understand it, but it was, the way I understood it when I entered, and I tell you what, the young men that are entering now think about it the same way. as a quest. And it is like a job that needs to be done, and you just better man up and do it. And so when I entered, I think I told you that between being an inquirer and a catechumen, I was that period took about 5 years, and I would say I was a very good faster, but I was also a terrible one in the sense that it was no problem for me to keep the fast. It was easy, but I was terrible for my family, and I was terrible to live with, and not a very nice person. And surprised that Matushka put up with me. But anyway,
Is it
it is
because of the fasting, or just in general you were
just how
terrible to live
rigid I
with?
was. Just how rigid I was
I see. I see.
about everything. Yeah, I mean, I was reading labels and weighing out bread and all sorts of different stupid things that I shouldn't have been doing, that she had no idea what in the world was going on. And at that point I was unable to explain it to her, so she was just like, he's lost his marbles. And really I had, honestly. But then when I entered Orthodoxy and began fasting, all of a sudden it became one of the most difficult things that of my Christian life, because now all of a sudden I began to understand better the purpose of it, and it became a real challenge. I'll just say, yeah.
Well, since you mentioned it, what is it that you think constitutes the purpose of fasting?
So, if I would say for most people, the purpose of fasting is the ability to control your passions. At least that's what has really worked out for me. The ability to, in some small way, try to grab the serpent by the tail and see if there's any way that you can live a life of Christ through controlling of your passions. And so I learned that somebody one time told me that I should keep a log, and the log was really just very simple. And that to say, okay, at the end of the day, write down whether you did your prayer in the morning and your prayer in the evening, and whether you should have fasted and didn't. Just sort of keep a log on that, and then at the end, just sort of say you had a good day, bad day, whatever. It didn't take very long on that log for me to. Now I'm an engineer in my secular life. It didn't take me very long to realize that on the days that I prayed and fasted, that I was doing much, that I was able to actually participate in prayer, and that I was able to enjoy my family. I was more productive in just my general life, I would say, through this. So
You mentioned that young men nowadays have a similar idea to what you had, and of course you are now in a parish with a lot of converts to Orthodoxy. Is it roughly about at least a third of your parish that are converts?
I would say yes, Father. Yes.
Yeah, so about a third of the parish is converts. What is it that they think about Orthodox fasting? Not just the young men, but the older ones or the women as well. And do they ask you questions? What is the most challenging thing to them when it comes to fasting?
So I'll answer it in general first, and then maybe get more specific. In that, when they first approach it, they absolutely love it, and they dive deep, and um, were as enthusiastic and as good a faster as I was, and not very good to their families and things like that. That's my perception. And the same thing with prayer. I would say that for 3 weeks, they're able to fast and they're able to pray, and they think they're on top of the world. And then all of a sudden, it's not easy anymore. And I learned through Father Colin, who's Father Gregory Joyce's who's with Father Gregory Joyce at St. Vladimir's, how to sort of handle this, because I was struggling with, in talking to these people, there's only so much time you have with one-on-one, but really these people do need one-on-one. And what Father Collins suggested was that when the person becomes a catechumen, that you begin to confess them without giving them absolution. And this is a way that I've learned to find out how their life is going, find out what are the struggles they're dealing with in their life, and able to help me guide them as best I can in prayer and fasting and other things. So, like I said, for the first 3 weeks, everything's going great. And then after that, it sort of comes crashing down. The first thing that I try to work, I basically let them go for 3 weeks and don't worry about it, because they're not really listening. But after that, when they realize that they're struggling, then I try to talk to them. Yeah, we call them fasting rules, but they're not really rules. And the Orthodoxy has so few rules, and to try to free them up a little bit and then try to scale back what they're doing to try to get them to live a life of orthodoxy in its fullness. And fasting is definitely part of that, but that's not the only thing. I've got young men who have entered the church that are living with their parents who are not Orthodox. I've got young men who are just like the first time out on their own, and they've never been without meat. They don't know what a meal without meat is. It's just sort of beyond their comprehension. I've got other people that have gone through Eastern religions, and so they've been vegan for 7 or 8 years. And so this is sort of like no big deal to them. And so there's a whole range of different things going on. I get questions about, what do I do during basically the nativity season, where there's all sorts of office parties and things like that, and other people work in factories, and so a lot of times on Friday they will bring in an employee appreciation dinner, and there'll be chicken or some hamburgers or something like that. So there's all sorts of these different questions that they have, and I just think it's been helpful for me as their priest to be able to deal with them one-on-one.
Okay. Now, you mentioned you're an engineer. In addition to
did I? Okay.
being an engineer, you're also a parish priest, and a husband, and a father, and a farmer. I don't know. Am I forgetting anything? There's probably something. Oh, and a grandfather.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
So how do you approach fasting in your own life as a long-term sustainable practice in the context of all of this, the busy life that is can't be easy to reconcile a lot of those pieces that are running at the same time in different directions?
So I might just disagree with you a little bit and just say, actually, having all of those things going on makes fasting much easier.
Okay.
I think that people that are sedentary and are not busy, I think that fasting is much more difficult for them. But people that are active and working, just always doing something, which, Matush could always say, I've got ants in my pants. That I think it's actually much easier for me in keeping my life full. So I tell you what, you're not the first person that's commented on this, but I can't imagine life is sort of any other way. In terms of fasting, this work that you're doing in Phroneo has been so helpful to me. I was doing some of it. I was sort of considering some of it before, but it has really helped me sort of realize that, yeah, this is not really that big of a deal. In the sense, I would tell you that maybe describing a typical day is helpful in that, like this time of year, we have apples all over the place. And so I get up in the morning, I have, after quiet time, and then go to work, take a cup of coffee with me, I try to stretch out that cup of coffee till about 10 o'clock in the morning. Then I switch to tea, usually herbal tea. And then I might have an apple at noon or 1 or 2 or 3 whenever I get hungry. And I love apples, so take them with me. And then basically when I come home in the evening, we'll have a meal. And that's pretty much it. So on Wednesdays and Fridays, it's a fasting meal. Otherwise, it's not. So in that way, Matushka's likes cooking for me. I like to eat her food. So the biggest problem is eating the right portions. But in terms of fasting throughout the day, that's really not much of a problem. I would say that on days that I do a lot of farm work, I might, if it's a non-fasting day, I might have some eggs in the morning to sort of make sure I can power through the rest of the day. But I really drink. I sweat a lot. I have to drink an awful lot of fluids, and I usually either it's tea, or sometimes I might put a little bit of Gatorade powder in my drinks, just something to help me stay hydrated. Not in terms of like the actual additive itself, but in terms of making it taste good, so that it helps me drink a lot of it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So yeah. So
okay, so
yeah.
keeping busy, keeping distracted from snacks and even meals is one strategy.
Yeah, it helps you not even think about it. So anyway, that has been helpful for me. Yeah.
Now, do you find yourself at times having to make any compromises, either in how you manage your day-to-day life, or a compromise in fasting, whether your farming demands such a caloric output that you really can't be fasting too strictly on those days, or you decide that, well, you have to fast so strictly, so you can't really be working so hard?
So maybe 2 things on that. I would say during a fasting time, if Matushka thinks I'm lagging, then she will sort of give me a choice. She will say, okay, either you're going to eat a hard-boiled egg, or you're going to have some cheese on your salad, or I'm going to cook you some shrimp. I'm not a big shrimp fan, so we do have it occasionally, but not too often. And I would say usually I go for the hard-boiled egg. So during Lent, I might have a hard-boiled egg. Usually it's about half, or about the 4th week or so, and then maybe again in the 5th week. We'll see. And that seems to sort of push me over the hump. So that's my sort of compromise in that.
Well,
but the other fast, yeah,
maybe an acceptable substitute, considering you live in Wisconsin and all the shrimp has to come from very far away.
Yes, this is one thing I was going to say about my father, in that he was an extreme localist, and that he believed that it was very healthy to eat foods from nearby. In fact, he was so strict about that he said that he raised honeybees, because he said the only time that honey is good for you is if it's grown, if the bees have collected it from the plants in your area. So yeah, the idea of store-bought honey was just anathema to him. He just couldn't believe it.
I really wish we could have a very serious conversation about eating local foods in connection to fasting in our church. I think it's very important. I once decided to figure out where the shrimp comes from that is sold here in upstate New York, and it's Thailand, halfway around the globe. And of course, olives don't grow in upstate New York, so olive oil comes from thousands of miles away, and that's just the 2 products. I mean, there's more, but yes, I think it's important.
Yeah.
And sorry, go ahead.
No, I didn't have anything. Yep.
Yeah. So, are there any tricks or helpful tips that you've discovered in terms of combining the life that you live with the fasting discipline of the church. I don't mean shortcuts, but just adaptations or some helpful things.
So maybe it's just sort of an analogy that I use that is helpful for me. And I don't think I've ever told you about it. So this is probably the first time you've heard of it. I like to vision, the fathers of the church talk about the three-legged stool of prayer, fasting, and almsgiving. And I've sort of adjusted that a little bit to think about it instead of a three-legged stool, to talk about it as a triangular piece of fabric that on each corner of the triangle, there's a pole, and that pole represents either prayer, fasting, or almsgiving. And the job of my life is to have that, to keep that fabric off of the ground, to make sure that I'm doing each one of those disciplines, but also to make sure that I'm not doing one just to the exclusion of any of the others. So if you're doing two of them well, and not doing the third, so trying to work very hard on the balance. And I really try to talk to the converts about this also. I never say to them what I'm telling you. So they're going to hear it for the first time if they ever listen to the interview.
Well, I sure hope they do.
Yeah. So if they concentrate on fasting and not prayer, as you've said, it's just a diet. And so we have to figure out the prayer. And after a while, the prayer becomes a challenge for them, because they haven't developed a prayer life. And as Protestants, most of them come from being Protestant, they really haven't. And so just as an example, I try to say that, okay, you're a catechumen now, you must observe the Eucharistic fast. And when I say must, I say you need to try to observe the Eucharistic fast. And then as far as praying, that you need to pray with us in the church. We're blessed to have a deacon, Father Deacon Matthew. And I say, when Father Deacon Matthew is intoning the litanies, I said, you need to make them yourself. I said, that's where we're going to teach you how to pray in the church. And then you're going to take that home for yourself. And by that, I mean, like, as an example, when you're, for the fruits of the earth, I said, oh, that's the time to thank God for your favorite fruits or vegetables, or, different things. I said, when we pray for our civil authorities, I said, do you know who your representative is? Do you know who your senator is? Just mention those people under your breath as he's praying, and keep doing that, and try to make that prayer your own. Myself, I have found that to be very helpful in my own prayer life. I use the Jordanville prayer book, but I stop frequently to do the exact same thing that I'm trying to teach the catechumens and the converts, that if I come up to a certain part, that I've never done anything good in your sight, Lord, that I think about that, and try to just reflect for a moment on that, and really try to slow down in my prayers, even though I think most people, would have them memorized, and I have them memorized too, but try to be very careful about reading them and not just reciting them. So that's one of the ways that I feel like I can stay connected. The other thing is I do have a pretty discipline in terms of, for instance, as an example, it's very difficult for me to say the three canons and an akathist on a Saturday evening, or to say it on Sunday morning. Just my schedule doesn't really work that way. So I've broken that up to say, Monday, one canon, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then say the akathist on Thursday, and then I usually choose another akathist on Friday. And I try to really stick to that schedule. That's very helpful, and that helps me also vary my prayers. I look forward to the Akathist, but I know what I'm saying each night, or the canons. I know what I'm saying each night. So I think it's important to be able to do that. And the other thing is, there's some prayers that I just really enjoy, so that I've added. And I think it's just important to make the prayers your own. So that has been very helpful to me. In terms of like the fasting part of it, I think we've already discussed that. But when a person is confessing to me and they talk about struggling in fasting or struggling in prayer, first thing I typically ask them is say, okay, so what acts of mercy are you doing? Are you always thinking of yourself? Are you thinking about any others? When is the last time you did a kindness for somebody? When's the last time you mowed the lawn even though your mom didn't ask you to mow the lawn, or something like that, or did the dishes? And so try to get these young men to stop being so involved so much in self-love, I guess. And I suffer from that myself. And so that I sort of live vicariously through them. As I see the things that they're struggling with, I realize that I'm struggling with the same things.
So now to kind of maybe elaborate on the one point that you made. So in order to pay more careful attention to your prayer rule, you break up some of the prayers into portions, or uh, 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 not so much the prayers, but the rule itself. You break up into portions and spread it out throughout the week, and you add some prayers that you really like. They're your favorite, so they naturally capture your attention and keep your attention. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you do that for the sake of being able to pay attention and not just rattle them off mindlessly, or there's some other reason you're doing it. Well,
So I
time
think
probably, right? Time is one of the things that's probably in short supply on Saturday night.
Yeah, so Saturday night, we serve the vigil infrequently. I think we've only done it twice or three times in the last year. So we serve Vespers, but after Vespers, I hear confessions. So I'm usually getting home about 8 o'clock in the evening, and there's always a little bit more to do with the homily prep and things like that. And I want to get a good night's sleep. So I'm trying to get to bed by 10 o'clock. And that's usually about the time that it's 10 or 10:30. So regarding the prayers, I mean, I think as a priest, you have a lot of people that ask you to pray for them. And so like in the prayer book, we'll talk about those in sickness. Well, I think I probably got 50 people that are sick that I pray for, and I just list their names. And then like the very next thing is sorrow, those people that are in sorrow. So then I've got probably another 50 names or so that I read. I just break that up and I just insert those names in each one of those petitions in the prayer book. Like as an example, when we pray for our hierarchs, that's another subject, but I don't like the fact that the Jordanville prayer book says Eastern Orthodox hierarchs. I don't have any idea why they say that, but anyway, in the English version. But anyway, so then, I've got a list of, metropolitans that I'd like to pray for, and well, first of all, patriarchs, metropolitans, archbishops, and then priests that I've served with. I continue to pray with them, and then a list of deacons. So yeah, it helps me think about them when I say their names. And so I feel like I'm really praying, I guess I would say. I don't really know if I am, but I think lifting up those names to Christ is one of the very small things that I can do. So,
Right. So it's one of the questions that came up on Phroneo once, is what are the ways of maybe helping the mind not wander during prayer, keeping it focused on prayer, and sounds like maybe making it personal, saying the names of the people that you know, breaking up just a standardized form of the prayer into a more personalized form is one of the ways of doing it.
Yeah, I would say that different people will give you different suggestions. Like Patriarch Onufri asked during the war in the Ukraine that people would say Psalm 45 and Psalm 90 in part of their morning prayer rule. So I do that, and it's been long enough that I have it memorized now. But I still read them, and it's been pretty powerful. Particularly Psalm 90, because we use Psalm 90 a lot in the church, and so particularly Psalm 90. And I just thought it was such a beautiful thing, and it's one little thing that I can do with regarding the war that's going on that he asks, and there's not a lot of things I can do, but he asked for that, and it seemed like a small offering.
Wonderful. Well, back to fasting. I have another question for you.
Okay.
Wisconsin is known for its polar vortices. I don't know if everybody knows what they are, but it's when apparently some really cold air from the Arctic dips down into a few states. I think Wisconsin is kind of somewhere there in the middle, and makes the air very cold. I remember when we lived there, even our dogs did not want to go out. They thought it was too cold. I think it was something like 46 below one day.
With wind chill, maybe.
If I remember correctly. Yeah. I don't know. It felt pretty cold. So, do you have any thoughts or opinions, ideas about anything that might require adaptations of the fasting rule when it comes to different local conditions? Because our fasting rules come from the Mediterranean. It does not get that cold there. They don't have polar vortices. It's not easy to find fresh local figs in Wisconsin, or many other things for that matter. Shrimp is another one. Olive oil. I don't think olives grow in Wisconsin. So what do you think about various adaptations? I mean, you mentioned one. Your wife gives you a choice. You eat shrimp or you eat egg. So you choose egg. I think it's a
cheese. Okay, sometimes she said cheese. Yeah,
that's right. You are in Wisconsin. Yeah. I think it's a wise choice personally. It's certainly wiser than eating shrimp from Thailand, in my opinion. But what do you think about that?
Maybe I would start with a question for you, and that is the thing that because I have a lot of people ask me questions, and nobody's asked me this question, and I'm glad they haven't, because I don't know how I would answer. One of the things that we talk about in the fast is not eating animal products, like milk, cheese, eggs, things like that. But my dad would say, well, honey is an animal product. And so, but we can have honey, my dad was, I'm saying myself, thinking like my father would. So I struggle a little bit with that. The only thing that I could think of is that the monks somehow figured out that they felt different after eating animal products than they did by not. So what do you think?
Well, I have to maybe say that I am still in the process of, well, you're a scientist. I'll use the phrase that scientists love. More research is needed.
Okay.
That said, I think that the idea that circulates around the Orthodox world, that when we fast we abstain from animal products, I actually think that the idea is incorrect. I do not think that we abstain from animal products, and it's not really about honey per se, although that is one example, and you could just say, well, that's an exception. Maybe. No, it could be an exception. There are some exceptions that are made in similar ways. I once heard an interesting idea from an old believer friend. He said, the Bible says that we should not eat pork. Well, it is true. It does say that in the Old Testament, naturally. Um, but the reason we eat pork is because, well, when the Roman soldiers, when Christ was on the cross and the Roman soldiers dipped the sponge in vinegar and what is that word in English? Gall? Is that the word?
Gall.
Yes, gall. The gall came from a pig. And so from the early days of Orthodoxy, the fathers said, well, because they tried to defile Christ with this pork product, the Romans, that is, because Christ was a Jew, so that was an additional insult. Because they tried to defile him, we will eat pork. Now, I do not think that it's correct. It's an interesting idea. There are a lot of these popular.
It's a good story.
It's a good story. There are a lot of popular beliefs that exist in the Orthodox world that have little to do with historicity, but they are, let's just say, spiritually beneficial to one in one form or another. So there can be exceptions. So that's not to say that we can't have exceptions, but I think that treating a fast as a form of kashrut, that is to say, we observe it the same way that the Orthodox Jews observe kosher rules. Some things are allowed, some things are not allowed. This is clean, this is unclean. This you can mix, that you cannot mix. I think that's a grave mistake for Christianity. And I understand why it's easier to say, well, in a simplified way, when you're trying to explain fasting to somebody, in the first approximation, just stay away from animal products. It's easy to say, it's easy to understand, but it's actually incorrect. I think we're doing ourselves a disservice, because if we repeat it enough times over several hundred years, we begin to believe that this is what fasting is. And then we can point to examples from a few hundred years ago. Well, look, they believed that too, and it's now ancient knowledge. We're following the footsteps of our forefathers. Well, in a manner of speaking, I just don't know that those footsteps are necessarily on the right path. So, in my opinion, they're not. So it is not about animal products. I also don't really know that a monk who eats an egg on a feast day feels less spiritual or further from God, or in some way more hardened in his heart than the same monk when he does not eat an egg, or when he eats a shrimp on a fasting day. Because if that were so, I would suspect that monks would never eat eggs. They would just make that a rule. Because if eggs remove you further from God, or from God's grace, or from the state of spiritual attunement to the Holy Spirit, or any other such thing, then those products are clearly detrimental to one's spiritual life, and cannot be and should not be eaten at all, ever. Why would you do that on a holy feast day? This is not just a birthday party. This is the holy feast day of the church, a very spiritual event. Why would you defile it by eating things that make you hardened in your heart or spirit, or you name it? So no, I don't really think that that's true. I've heard this idea. Somebody said, well, when we eat animal products, we partake of animal passions. And so during the fast, we stay away from those products because we don't want the animal passions. I find that hard to believe, because if that were the case, again, well, we should all become vegans. Veganism should be the default for Christianity, but it just hasn't been. That's just not what Christ taught, or the apostles, or the Holy Fathers. So I don't find that to be convincing. Besides, very well, being a farmer, having farm animals, the most passionate animal of them all is the human animal.
For sure,
Farm
without a
animals are
doubt.
not particularly passionate. They are quite calm and serene, many of them, at least most of the time. I know we're approaching the rutting season, so that's different, but still, it's only a small season. With humans,
Yeah.
it seems to just be the season of their life. So it's so this idea, I just simply don't find it convincing. What I do find convincing is that animal products are the best of what we can have. There's a difference between having a piece of lettuce and a steak. A
Yeah.
piece of lettuce, well, I don't know. There's probably some nutrition in it. A steak will give you a lot of nutrition, a lot of calories, a lot of sustenance for your brain activity. There are fatty acids, there's protein, there are all kinds of things. I think that people have always known that certain products are the best or better than other products, and they're reserved for feast days. When there's a feast, the father slaughters the fatted calf. He does not go to the field to pick broccoli for the feast. He slaughters the fatted calf because it's a feast. And so I think that that's where the true distinction lies. Some days are fasting. That is to say, they're not feasting, so we should not be feasting on those days. Other days are feasting, so it's appropriate to feast on those days. It's not going to make
Okay.
us less spiritual to observe a feast, but feasts are special days, holy days, and we should just not be feasting nonstop because that profanates, desecrates the feast. It just dilutes it, so to speak. I think
Yeah.
that's
I
closer to.
appreciate
But again, like I said in the beginning, I think more research is needed.
that. Well, you asked about adjustments for where we live, and I don't know if any adjustments are needed because I think people like in Wisconsin we do an awful lot of canning. Matushka loves to can. We've got tomatoes and all sorts of different vegetables and things like that she stores up for us. Everything. And now we got apples, so she's got applesauce canned and things like that. So it does involve preparation. I talked to one person who Matushka just canned a bunch of beets. And I talked to one person who says, oh, she doesn't can her beets. She leaves them in her refrigerator all the time. And in fact, she says about the time, in midsummer when the beets start coming on, that she just finished off her last year's beets. I haven't tried that. And I don't think Matushka would allow me to keep the beets in the refrigerator all year. But anyway, I don't.
Maybe you would have to have a very large
I don't.
refrigerator.
Second one, maybe. Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know as far as I think about my daughter lived in South Korea as a teacher, English teacher for 4 years. And I was able to go over and visit her once. And the way that the Koreans survived the winter was just very fascinating to me. And this tradition is continued to carry on, is that they made kimchi with cabbage, and they made kimchi out of anything. And they would have these great big, basically, 10-gallon clay pots that they would, fill up with the salt solution and everything like that, and the chopped vegetables. And then they would bury it in the ground. And then all winter, they would, slowly get to each one of the pots and dig them up, and that's what they would eat. And they would eat rice and kimchi all the time. And so, yeah, and I would tell you, when it's time to make kimchi, even if you live in the city in South Korea, they make a lot of kimchi. All those apartments smells like rotten cabbage. It's terrible. But anyway, so I don't know as far as adaptions. I mean, what are the things that I would say one of the things I do that helps me is I like really spicy food. And I would say during the fasting times, I do increase the spices. Really like it hot, really hot, spicy food. But other than that, I mean, I love nuts, but like you said, nuts, there's very few nuts in Wisconsin, but the only thing we have are walnuts, pretty much. Salads are expensive.
Well, they do say the
but I would
walnuts
just
are the best nuts for your brain health.
Okay, well, we do collect an awful lot of walnuts, black walnuts and regular walnuts. So I really enjoy those. But once again, those take preparation, and it's one of the things we just learned as a kid. To go out and collect those nuts. This year, by the way, is a banner year for acorns. Now, we don't eat acorns, but I tell you what, the squirrels are just going crazy with the acorns. So yeah, I guess I would just say that for somebody who lives in the city that's not used to the country, that has to go out and that they can go and buy anything they want, yeah, go ahead and do that. But I think for most people that grew up on a farm, they just know you have to do a lot of canning and preserving and things like that.
Well, so you speak of canning, making kimchi. I actually think it's probably not a bad idea. Not a bad way of preserving vegetables is by some sort of a fermentation process. Sauerkraut, kimchi. That's great. What other advice would you give to people? Maybe you found something helpful for yourself that works for you in terms of observing fasts. You mentioned keeping busy. You mentioned spicy foods. You mentioned an apple at lunch. You mentioned having someone.
That was not just one apple, by the way. Usually I eat about 3 apples a day.
A basket of apples. You also mentioned about something very important as someone like your wife paying attention to how you are actually doing, and maybe letting you know if you maybe should eat something and not fast so much. I think that's actually extremely important for most people, to have someone like that who can take care of them. Maybe a friend. It doesn't need to be a wife. It could be a friend. It could be a parish priest, perhaps, if the parish priest is able to pay enough attention to those things, which is very difficult. But what other things do you think are important to maybe mention that would be helpful?
Yeah, I would say, please stay away from processed foods. Processed foods only make you more hungry. They do not satiate you. So please just stay away from processed foods. And I think the people that try to fast using processed foods, like, they can buy fake, soy mayonnaise, and, I'm not trying to be critical of that. If that's what you need to get through, fine. But
I will be critical of that on your behalf. Yes, that's not good.
Okay. Yeah, I would say
that's not to say anything specific about soy mayonnaise per se, but those substitutes, they're usually
in general, yes,
substitutes in general. If you're trying to eat a soy hot dog instead of a regular hot dog, well, what precisely is the point of that?
I have to admit, Father, that I did. My spiritual father, just loves these fake soy sausages and stuff. So one time he had me try it, and I tell you, I was sick for 2 days. And my body just couldn't digest it. And so not eating processed foods is no problem for me. But when I see other people trying to survive on, on things, just highly processed foods, it's not good. I think they intentionally do it to make you more hungry.
Have you tried soy ice cream?
Oh, please, Lord, no.
They say it's Lenten.
No. I don't care. If I'm gonna eat ice cream in Lent, it's gonna be real ice cream. I would say ice cream is not as big of a deal for me, but I miss eggs and yogurt during Lent. I really like yogurt, so. And don't buy the yogurt with all the flavors in it. Buy just the plain yogurt.
Now,
unless you make it yourself.
Let's talk about your ministry, your parish, your parishioners. We already mentioned that about a third of your parish is converts, but maybe let's start from the beginning. How did your parish come to be? Where is it? Is a good question to start with, maybe.
Yeah. So it's located in Portage, Wisconsin. Portage is located about an hour north of, roughly an hour north of Madison, and about 2 hours north of Chicago, and sort of the south central portion of the state. It's called portage because it's very near it's the nearest point between the Wisconsin and the Fox rivers. The Wisconsin River flows south to the Gulf of Mexico, or is it the Gulf of America? I forget now. But anyway, and then the Fox River flows north to the St. Lawrence Seaway. So at one time we had a canal that connected those two, so there was actually shipping, but then the railroad sort of took that over. So we, as you are our founding priests, and thank God for you, but we met in an Episcopal church that we were able to eventually buy. The Episcopal church is right next to the fire station in Portage. So if everybody's coming, just head for a downtown and find the fire station. We're right next door to that. I was doing a report for the diocese and just did a quick count, and we have roughly between, I would say, around 50 members of the church, and I would say only 10 have a Portage address. So we're still sort of growing in Portage. They barely know that we're here, but we are growing
How large
very
is Portage?
rapidly. Portage is a town of 10,000 people.
10,000.
And so 10 people is a few, not enough. And I told people, I said, I think at one time last year, I told the parish, I said, I think God is protecting us, because if even 1% of the people in Portage started attending our Orthodox church, that we could not handle it. So let's get ready, So that's what we're trying to do. We have about a third converts, we'd say, a third of Slavic origin, and a third of Romanian Moldovan origin. And that latter, we have a very large Romanian Moldovan contingent in Wisconsin Dells, which is about a half hour north of us. A lot of people know where Wisconsin Dells is.
And you learned a few Romanian words yourself, right?
Yeah, I've learned to do the litanies, and I've learned so far only the small litany in Romanian, and I'm learning the Lord's Prayer in Romanian. So yeah, doing my best on that. I know enough Romanian that I can understand the service in Romanian, so I know where we are. So, but as far as me speaking it, that's a tragedy. But anyway, we've been able to purchase a hall and a church, and it's just a fantastic property. We have a rectory that's right next door that we're getting in the process of purchasing. We're looking forward to that. We have to raise some more money for that, but God has blessed us greatly, and we're growing as fast as I think we can manage.
Wonderful. And so a third converts, and the Romanian and the Slavic, I imagine you mean different backgrounds of Slavic people. Are they
Russian, Ukrainian, Belarusian, Bulgarian?
Are they usually cradle Orthodox, or are they kind of Orthodox, maybe heritage, but then they are essentially also converts when they come to your church?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And I would say for all of both the people of Slavic origin and the Romanians, it's just an example. For several of the Romanian families, I think they grew up in a very pious most of them all of them that I know of grew up in very pious families. They came to the United States and they got involved in, just say, our materialist culture. And they found it very easy to make money, and many of them have been very successful, and they fell away from the church and slowly began to realize what they were missing. And so they've returning. And I would say that's the same thing. I can't tell you how many times that I've asked, okay, what is your tradition for, let's say, nativity or something like that? And they're just racking their brains out trying to remember, okay, did we have a holy meal, or when did they do certain things, and they barely remember because it was all as a child, and they really didn't practice as they became adults. So they're becoming American Orthodox. All of them really are becoming American Orthodox. Mm-hmm. And I would say even for the people of Slavic origin, they're all, some people call them reverts, but they're all converts. And I imagine
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say that I really try to. All of them are just very, very generous and are very humble about asking questions about how to observe the faith. And I would say, particularly, that is one thing about, I'll say, the cradle families, that they quickly sort of know how to. They remember from their childhood what Orthodoxy was like, and they quickly try to adapt, and they do a really good job of it.
So what I wanted to ask is, when it comes to various ascetic disciplines, well, more specifically, fasting and the prayer rule, their process of maybe entering deeper into the church involves something very similar to just a convert coming into the church and learning to fast and learning to pray almost from scratch, because they really haven't been observing that for quite some time. Is that correct?
Yes.
And so the advice that you offer to them is very similar, I assume, to what you would say to a convert from Protestantism.
Well, it is a little bit different. I can think of a couple different examples. Like we've got one, I'll say, Russian gentleman who I have spoken to him about fasting. I don't know how many times, but the language barrier. I mean, his English is excellent, and I think he understands me. I'm pretty sure he does, but he just, as an example, I don't care when it is. If there's any type of dairy product or like milk or anything in the fridge during a fasting time, he's bringing it out for the coffee. And, the ladies in the kitchen say, could you just please say something to him so he doesn't bring it out? And, I told him, I said, yeah, I'm not doing that. I said, you know what? If you want milk in your coffee, fine, go ahead. The people who want to observe the fast, they can observe the fast. Having coffee set up, having cream set out on the coffee table is not the biggest deal. He's doing the very best he can. I'm not going to worry about it. So anyway,
that's an interesting story. It reminded me of Archbishop Peter of blessed memory. We were having coffee one day, and I cannot remember how this topic came up, but somehow it did. So he said, well, he likes coffee, and he'll drink coffee, and naturally he'll drink it during Lent too, because, well, coffee is Lenten. But he said, well, you can't have coffee without half and half. And so during Lent, at least that's what he said, maybe half jokingly, maybe perfectly seriously. He said that during Lent, yes, half and half goes into the coffee.
yeah, and I would say, just along those same lines, I've had, some of the people say, well, you have to tell us, when it's a fasting day, like during Lent, you have to, on the little newsletter that I send out, you have to say it's a fasting meal and stuff like this. And finally, because some people, are bringing non-Lenten foods. And I did it for a little while, and finally the people that were saying that I needed to do this, I just said, you know what, I'm not going to do that anymore. I said, people are doing the best they can. I said, just, if you don't want to take their food, don't take their food. It's no problem. So
well, that's right.
It's
so
actually worked out.
Yeah, if somebody's fasting and they just choose not to take a certain dish, well, then that's probably a good approach.
Yeah, yeah. So, and it's, every time, I think there's milk in that. I think there's milk in that. I said, oh, why don't you taste it and find out? So, but anyway,
There's
so
a story.
it's,
Another story comes to mind. Again, I don't know how true this is. It may be only spiritually true, but not historically true. But there was a certain holy elder who received a group of maybe pilgrims, maybe people who just wanted to talk to him, and then somebody brought out a nice baked I don't know what you would call it, maybe a piece of bread, or a loaf of bread, but a very nice loaf of bread, and not of a bread kind, but more of a pastry kind, perhaps. And somebody else said, well, there are eggs in it, so we can't have it. It happened to be a fasting day. And so this elder said, well, just take the eggs out and eat the rest. And, it's something along those lines.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah. I Fasting is just one of the helps. I would say that if the people are not, like we talked about, not praying, but the other thing is if they're not reading scripture, then if they're not really learning, our scriptures, and really I've tried to encourage them that a good time to read the Bible is just before you pray. Or if you're really fasting, probably doesn't take you that long to eat, so maybe just after you eat you should just read a chapter of the gospel right after the meal, or like in our family we did it before we ate.
Well, since we're on this topic, actually, I have a question for you. So what do you think
Yeah.
about listening to the scripture while you eat, maybe on Audible or some other app or platform? I mean, there are many different ones in different languages. I know that not too long ago, when I was still able to go for trail runs, I can no longer do that, sadly, but when I did, I would always listen to the Psalms, and I found that to be a fascinating experience of being in nature and listening to the Psalms. It was absolutely magnificent. So that I suppose something similar could be done during meals, not family meals, hopefully, but maybe when one's having lunch by himself or herself. Or what do you think about that idea?
So I think there is no bad idea, no inappropriate. Well, I shouldn't say no, but I mean I would just say anytime. I myself, as an example, an Ancient Faith Radio, they have daily scripture readings that I listen to on my way to and from work, and then they have the Path, which gives you the scripture readings for the day. The daily scriptures actually, you read through the Bible in the whole year, the entire Bible. I think that's great. And so I would encourage people to do that. I've noticed myself, and I don't know if it's the same for everyone, and that is reading is different. And that when you read the words on a page, I think it goes into a different place in your brain. That's the only way I can sort of think of it. I myself, I like to memorize things, and I actually memorize things by remembering where the words are on the page.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
And so, while yes, listening is absolutely great, and it's a wonderful thing to do. I encourage you to do it. But I tell people, I said, if you just listen, if that's all you do, or if you just sort of read and check it off, I said, yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's a very good starting point. But eventually, I said, that's like, sort of, thinking you know everything about a lake by just sort of rowing your boat across the lake. I said, eventually you got to dive into the lake. If you really want to know what the lake is like, you've got to go underwater. You've got to be able to see it. So I talk about encouraging to sort of dive deep in the scriptures. And so I said, yeah, continue to do that other thing. But maybe what you would do is like the Blessed Theophylact. He's got a wonderful commentary on the Bible that you can read, and he's got all the Gospels. I said, why don't you read a chapter of the Gospel and then read Blessed Theophylact and see, did you think that was what the Gospel said? And what do you need to change in your mind so that you get it that way? So I encourage people to get deeper, to really develop, and I'll just say, use an Orthodox phronema, that anybody can read the Bible and interpret themselves, but unless we have help, unless we have training wheels, the gospel is not going to become real to us. And we need training wheels for all that.
Wonderful.
So read a commentary along with the scripture.
Great. Is there anything that I didn't ask that you think I should have asked, that you think is important to mention?
Well, with regarding fasting, as you know, this is
Not
a
not
topic
only
that,
fasting. Yeah, maybe
yeah.
anything else at all.
So I guess two things, and that is that I I ask people to help me also to pray for the next priest that'll come in Portage. I have no idea when that will come, but one of the big problems we have in Orthodoxy is an extreme shortage of priests, and we really need to work hard on training our young people and not only encourage them in a monastic vocation, but in a clergy vocation. And I ask people to pray for our future priests, so that because Orthodoxy is growing far faster than we are able to produce priests. And I know that God will provide, but He sure likes us to pray about it and recognize that it's needed. And the other thing is that I think that we really suffer with Christian education for our children. And so that's one of the things that we're working very hard in the parish to provide Christian education. We're really maybe a year, maybe we're 2 years away from starting a parish school. We've had people go through training, and I think it's not, my wife was a public school teacher for many years. It's not that I am against public schools at all. I just think that a parish school can provide sort of a different perspective on the way the world is that can be very helpful in this day and age. So Christian education, both for our priests and for our children, I just think are absolutely critical, and ask people to pray about that and see how they can contribute to that.
Yes, that reminds me. I was at an event with Bishop Luke of Holy Trinity Monastery just very recently, and he said something interesting. He urged everybody to send their sons, to send their nephews, to send any young men to the Holy Trinity Monastery. He said, we will make them into monks, we will make them into priests, we will teach them to paint icons, we will teach them anything they want to know. Just send them over. And I suppose that's along the same lines.
Yeah, well, I'll just add one more thing. We also need that he didn't mention, that maybe because I'm sure it was on his mind, is we also need bishops. And our diocese with Archbishop Peter's repose, we're without a bishop, and it's almost been a year now. And having bishops is extremely important for us. And so Bishop Luke also needs to make bishops.
I don't know if he can really tackle that particular task by himself, but he's part of the part of the Council of Bishops. Yes, I'm sure they're working on it.
Well, I know they are, but I don't envy them at all.
Yes, I understand what you mean. It is yes, it's very difficult to find people who are able to take on the responsibility, who are willing to take on the responsibility. And maybe it's always been that way, because we have examples from the lives of the saints from many, many centuries ago who would be elected either into priesthood or bishopric, and they would literally run away. There's an interesting example. I think it is from the 4th century, late 4th century, perhaps early 5th, when that particular candidate ran away and hid as the bishop came to his town to make him a priest. And the bishop waited in church and waited and waited. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, it took about 3 days before somebody said, well, he's hiding, at whatever location. And it was too far away. And so the bishop performed the ordination like what we're doing by a Zoom call, so to speak.
In absentia?
In absentia, that's right. He ordained the poor the poor man
Beautiful.
without him being there. said all the prayers, and said, "Well, go tell him he's now an ordained priest." So once the word reached this man, he said, "Well, there's nothing I can do now." So he returned to his town, and then the bishop actually finished the ordination by the laying out of hands, or whatever else had to be finished up. But that's one of the stories. That's of course only one of many like that or similar. Finally, for the Job, for the
Yes.
people in the area, and that is Wisconsin, that is not too far from Madison. Actually, you say an hour. It's probably an hour to some parts of Madison. I remember it only took us about 35 minutes to actually get to Madison, or at least to the closest part of Madison. So it's not that far, but
Yes.
so for the people in that area, maybe close to Madison, Wisconsin Dells, Baraboo, Portage, how do they find your church? Do you have Facebook? I know you have Facebook. So besides Facebook, so first of all, what is your Facebook page, and is there any other way for them to connect? And also, how do they visit? You said look for the firehouse. What is the actual address?
So thank you for asking. So yeah, Facebook page, St. John the Wonder Worker. Our patron is St. John of Shanghai and San Francisco. And he is a wonderful patron for us. Our website is orthodoxportage.org. And so I know that we have been around long enough that if you search for Orthodox Portage, we'll be on the top. We'll be the top of the Google search engine. So yes, for those people that are interested, if you're in Wisconsin Dells, we're the closest. To give you an idea, I mean, I've lived in Portage most of my life, but just to give you an idea, so there's two, I'll say, well-established Orthodox churches in Madison with a smaller mission. But then if you have to go 2 hours east, or basically an hour and a half west, or basically 3 hours north to find the next Orthodox church. So we're very well located. The other thing is that we're located in Columbia County in sort of the northwest corner. That won't mean a lot to people, but other than the two counties north of us, Marquette and Adams County, are the two poorest counties in the state with the lowest per capita income. And so we really do have, while Madison is full of professionals and I'll just say wealthy people, we are at the border of people that are really struggling in this time. And so we're getting more and more interest from those counties. So yes, if you're vacationing in the area in the Dells, we have every summer, every Sunday in the summer, we always have people coming from the Dells. And then we've been around long enough. We received a blessing in 2018, so we haven't been around that long. But now we've already getting people returning who are on vacationing that go to the Dells, and then they plan to come down on Sunday for liturgy.
Right,
So
wonderful,
it's
wonderful.
Yeah.
So orthodoxportage.org.
Yep.
St. John the Wonder Worker on Facebook, right? St. John the Wonder Worker Church on Facebook. And you're on which street in Portage?
211 West Pleasant.
West Pleasant. That's the best name for a street with a church on it.
Yes.
And Sundays, what time do you have services on Sundays?
Yeah, we have hours at 9, and liturgy generally starts around 9:30, and we try to hold that consistent for feast days also.
And it's a beautiful 100-year-old, more than 100-year-old building next to the firehouse with an absolutely magnificent stained glass window.
Yes, we have as Father Sergey was mentioning, we have a stained glass window that came from the 1905, I think, World's Fair in Chicago. They built an Episcopal church down there for that fair, and it had the stained glass window. And then this church was in the process of being completed. That window was transported to Portage to put in this church, and we have people come by. Several people come by that interested in stained glass windows to see that window. It's called the Rose Window. a circular window, just absolutely beautiful.
All right. So if you're in the area, whether you're interested in Orthodoxy or in beautiful stained glass, you have to visit St. John the Wonder Worker Church.
Can I maybe just one more thing for you that I thought was curious, because we were talking about people coming. So we have many Moldovan families that then have their parents will come over, usually in the early spring. And in this one particular case, father and mother came over and stayed with the family. And I didn't know this, but she was just the mother was just amazed at our agape meal. That every Sunday we have an agape meal. Sometimes there's a lot of food, sometimes there's not so much food, but it's all good. There's always coffee. But anyway, apparently they did not do that.
Half and half.
Yeah. Apparently they did not do that back in her village in Moldova. And she made the priest start doing it. And she got together like 3 or 4 women. And so here we are, I'll just say an American Orthodox church, and they transported something back to Moldova. I got a real kick out of it.
There you go. And make sure to ask them to officially name it the Portage meal, or the Portage agape meal. They have
Portage
to.
Agape meal. I will bring that up.
The tradition will carry on. Hundreds of years from now, somebody will say, well, see, they first started it in Portage.
Beautiful.
All right, Father Job, thank you so much for your time. First of all, you're a very busy man. We talked about that, and you gave us very generously an entire hour and a half. So thank you so much for being able to do it, for agreeing to do it, and for giving so many wonderful answers to these questions. I hope it's not the last time that we're talking about things. Maybe next time we could talk about prayer a little bit in more detail. I think that's a very important topic.
Okay.
So thank you.
Thank you, Father Sergey, for everything that you do. Yeah.